like to have you on UCLA. You have been on this campus before, but welcome. And I'd like to cover a number of topics with you today. Can you all hear me in the back, by the way? No. I'd like to cover a number of topics here today, many that you've written about either in books or in the New Yorker, with innovation, creativity, etc. And ask your thoughts about a few of those things. And I'd like to leave time for the audience to ask a few questions as well. So we'll get to that at the end. I thought it might be an interesting game to play with you in the audience. Let's see who can come up with the next topic that we'll hear in Malcolm's New Yorker article or in his next book. So put on your thinking caps. And we'll get back to that later. So I want to start with a question and topics I know you've been asked a number of times before and have thought about a number of times. And that is the topics of your books and even your New Yorker articles. And so your books deal with human nature and society nature and how we as humans or as society reacts with sometimes interesting and unexpected conclusions based on data that you research. And I think it's fascinating to know and gain a little insight into how you do come up with some of the topics that you come on. So we'll start with that.
Yeah, that's always the impossible question to answer. There's no, I don't have a methodology. I have a sense of desperation when someone asks, my agent asks me where the next book is, or my editor asks me. Because in New Yorker we have a number of words. We have a contract which calls for a certain number of words every year. And if you don't meet your quota, they claw back your money. So it's quite there's a certain amount of stress involved. And I think, so with the New Yorker or a book is basically, in my case, each chapter has to be a different sort of idea, and I might have 8 chapters. So you need to have 8 ideas for a book. And the New Yorker, I write about 8 pieces a year. I need to have 8 ideas. So we're talking about 8 ideas a year. Now, I don't have 8 ideas a year. I have 2. So 6 is tough, the last 6. And so I do things like I spend a lot of time at NYU Library. And I go and I would spend sometimes weeks at a time just randomly reading journals, going through the last 25 years of table of contents of 10 different random journals, rooting around the stacks, playing endless games on SSRN and JSTOR. Just kind of, and it's not, you almost never get the thing you want to write about from that kind of searching, but you get the thing that leads you to the thing that leads you to the thing you want to write about. So you're constantly, and I store a lot of little tidbits because I come back to them years later, and sometimes many years later. Like, I'll give you an example. I once had a piece many years ago called John Rock's Carrot that was about the history of the pill and what anthropologists tell us about menstruation. And I got interested in it because I had a conversation with OB/GYN, a friend of mine that in passing one day, that from an evolutionary standpoint, the notion that a woman would have a period every month is really unusual. Because for most of human history, overwhelmingly, women have very few periods. They were either pregnant or nursing. So if you look at primitive societies, a woman might have 20 periods in her life up until really recently. I thought it was really fascinating. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I literally held on to that little thing in my head about 5 years. And then I ended up writing this piece. Because I read another thing which I thought I learned, again, was that I learned really fast, that man who did most of the clinical research, first was Catholic. Not just very Catholic, whose goal in life is to get killed past hope. And the way to get past hope was to convince hope that the pill was a natural form of birth control. And he win. It says the pill is after all natural hormone, right? So
And have that play out.
well, so then you realize that the second thing you did was you had to make it seem as natural as possible when you were on the pill. So that's why the old formulations, still in many formulations today, a woman take the one break, right? So they can make something that resembles, it's actually not, but it resembles it. That's their medical reason. That's John Ross, that's that guy. God had a better chance of getting a pathopatho. Mimic natural once a month. I mean, almost that, almost with the very last note, die. And then you lose state. He actually ends up. So hard. I was mate. Oh my goodness! What a wonderful story! What a way to tell the story of this weird evolutionary fact that monthly menstruation is anomalous in the history of species. So that was the amount of time separated the facts was it might have been a decade. But I do a lot of that kind of.
So part of my mind is that you are a connector. You have facts in there, stories that you guys try to find.
Because it's not like you know that if you're a scientist, you do something similar, but the things that connect must have real connections, logical connections, meaningful connections. I don't have to have I simply have things that are fun to gather.
You have my brand. But you enjoyed that process of finding the connection, putting pieces together.
Oh, it's fun. And you also find things. This is one sense in which I think what I would like what all you do is fight that is you discover what is true, but that you don't know about is way more interesting than ever had. In other words, the undiscovered world is 10 times more fascinating. So I've been in my coach out around the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King. So I read all the standard histories, which they're all really wonderful. And then that's the first. And then the second side is you start reading the stuff that's in the footnotes, and then you read the stuff that's in the footnotes. But by the third layer, the stuff is so fantastic. Can't believe this. Can't believe it. Like I was one moment writing about Birmingham. Birmingham is 60 village for that south. It's the most racial body in America. The people who tell famous. Here's the standard. People tell those jokes about one was a black guy was like something in Chicago or some of that had no reading. So I was like, what was that? Well, I drowned Jesus asked so to Birmingham. She says, no, she's alarmed. She looks and says, Jesus say with you? And he says, Jesus say so as far as matters. The story is not the worst thing happening. It's Birmingham. It's just Birmingham was divided. If you were black, you couldn't buy land. That was zone white. And so there was clear lines, and that's why they call it. So a black man buys a house in a black neighborhood, and it's been discovered that it's been zone white. So then he tries to sell it to a white person. No white person. Why? Because it's in the black man. So then the inside was in. Then the city intervenes and sues him. Then moving in because it's not white. No, it's like this is 1960. Almost my lifetime. This is something out of Alice looking glass. Right? This is crazy. And you discover go around, you're going to read those things that are just, how everything you know.
You mentioned, well, reading your books, especially your process, is very much like a science. One to cover what the facts are. You arrive at a hypothesis sometimes, a different hypothesis from what others thought. You research it, and then you go forward. So it's very scientific.
That's my thing, by the way. I like to think about it the opposite way. Every now and again, I'm off to talking about horrible things. Among them, people say, well, Sherry says research. Which I always want to say, I thought all science. I'm wrong.
In a little while, about tweaking innovation, or being innovative, to find and world needs. So absolutely, those are research things when others have done. And look at them. Very similar. But you must be nature curious. First, how we get. I mean, do you see stories or just stories?
Well, I'm institutional curious. I have to do my job. I need to year. And so, but I guess but in some ways I'm incredibly, I'm curious. I mean, it's odd. I don't define myself like there are all kinds of things that I just don't know to do anything. I have to watch this. I've been in this country for 6, 7 years. And I've thought about this recently. I've never watched the moment of I just don't understand why. What are you guys doing? I thought about the same way about academic job talks. I don't understand it. You take someone. I realize we're getting this is basically good. The academic job talk makes absolutely no sense. You take somebody and you put them. You say that under pressure, we would like you to perform in front of those who want to argue. And to do a job that you will never again have to do. There's a circumstance of the job talk will never be repeated if you get a job. Never. You're never going to be asked to talk about your entire rest of the outcome. So why would you have gave the function to engineering profession? Something that has nothing to do with fashion. Right? It's like when I hired for this police department, we make people all like fashion. Whoa, the next job, he's going to say, there's lots of those. I and I find that's a lot of what do you mean? And I realized, why am I interviewing them formally? That's nothing to do with your job. There's nothing to do with my system. Never asked me make examples, answer questions in a formal environment. Not on, so I it's kind of sense with it.
When you talk about interviewing, finding talent, fair books.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny that you bring up. We in academics are prime examples. So we'll start for leadership at academic institutions, I'm sure other institutions as well. And I'm not talking about in my book here. But often we get the leadership roles are stellar scientists, stellar physicians. But I'm not led. And so my hypothesis may be some of the issues going on, budget issues, whatever might be related to. That's sort of in there mismatch between how one finds talent and who one puts in those talent versus.
These issues are, they're incredibly important. Why would you win a Nobel as president of Dallas? Because president of your university. Last thing you want to do with a Nobel is have them be it's a crazy, notion that you should promote someone past it or other conference.
So how would you search for leadership? What would your criteria? Or how would you find your assistant?
Well, my father, who was academic, career was marked by similar stability. All people just already university. Name somebody new graduate place, basically this. So, and maybe the wrong ask this question. I will say, in the 70s, before people had like deep roots, you know, this kind of. My father now find some like basically alarm clocks. Go back to me, set the alarm for like 20 minutes, and then suddenly the meeting struck. I was standing like a good gentleman. I have nothing. Now that I found one. So then I said to her, "You hired me for this. I have nothing to do with it. They come up with it." So I had a string. Then that one was great. And she hired a maid. Other maid. What says the maid? You know. January 1st. I want to see this. Which one else? I think that's irrational.
We'll see if that works for them. And as far as topics, you must have constantly ideas that you go down the road halfway through writing an article or a book, and you must how often do you pause and say, how come this is crap? You ever, how many ideas turn out to be done?
Well, I mean, the answer is some. But a lot of times you can invest stuff. In fact, a lot of times the feeling, the thing you're working on, is that's never happens. Because it forces you to be way more creative about your thinking and searching. So I went my book. I did not like this time. Actually, great. I went to sort of five times the word about it, and how to really working on much. I think on one of the so the key is time. So given enough time, not almost anything can execute. But a lot of times, what happens is when we say that something is working, a lot of times we really run out of time. And I don't think we do a good job of distinguishing the two states. Something that is truly a lost cause, and something where we need some patience with it, right? Those are very different categories. And I am convinced that almost all the times when I think of lost cause, I say lost patience, there's something there.
Lost patience or haven't seen anything.
Or deadline on page. I mean, deadlines. I don't think. I actually love logs that especially on time. People. One of the principal ways in which people handicap themselves. Handicap by posing is by failing to set aside suspicion on a project. So by the whole idea of start the essay is that kind of notion, which is kind of madness, right? It's completely sane. Almost feeling what you would do on good. People just about that say, oh no, I work so well under pressure. Nonsense. There's no thing line in that. The idea that, when someone got a gun in my head, I never got better.
Have you feel translate like
I give myself overly generous. I like that set aside back. I like that. My dad told me something that he did very abstract mathematics, and he is a supremely unrigorous person. And he was very I'll always remember this. and it solved some problem. He was just waiting. You've been out of the garden getting a solution from this. I said, well, let's like a hand. When it is, you know, some working well, and he says outside, and then, cool. I just thought, always remember that, like 15 years. Right. You know, not a big there's certain things you should be able to structure so you wait for the solution.
A little bit about your view. The time that was dedicated to life, and that as a name advice about the power of the unexpected number of victories that are going on. Tell us a little bit about it, what these pieces is, some of the stories in my mind.
So I'm really interested in a couple of related things. One is interested in the kinds of behaviors that people make because they're powerful. So there's designation having every advantage of privilege predisposed you to do certain kinds of stupid things. And the answer is yes, really in some ways. Not the I don't deal with overconfidence, but the obvious ones. I think that's beyond that. I'm interested in more kind of specific. And then on the flip side, are there certain things that are really that useful that you are predisposed to or by virtue of being powerless and the answer is right. So that's part of book. And then I'm interested in beyond that, I'm interested in very notions of advantage. Like I have a whole section of getting adult education. And I have to think about how you don't know how good school doesn't have to deal with. You don't actually know what it does. Big picture.
And why?
I don't tell you. But there's all kinds of, and then I have stuff like, I will tell you this. The first one about you think about the book. The original story of David Life. And also versions of this thing. It's really interesting. So we have David with his sling, and Goliath in his armor. And David fell alive with a rock that said, forehead. And everyone said, oh my God, I was upset. This kid, all the time. So if you call people who are experts in ancient warfare, they will tell you about thoughts. They say, well, in ancient times, by the way, I'm going to do this here. Whenever I do things, and the reason I do things, whenever I start tell some story in front of an audience, people know, wait, correct. So years ago, this is years ago, Rockefeller, doing one in public and Rockefeller, you know, it's like the Nobel Prize, basically all have. So I don't know why it's so stupid. I made some reference to some missile in Q&A. The guy in my front row, like, you're down. And like, the other said, so thick, can't. His hand says, I tell you wrong, I know this because I invented that. I say this so that someone in this room I know knows more about what I'm going to say than I do. Just don't really get Okay. So in ancient times, there's three kinds of warriors. There's infantrymen, people with shields, swords, that's not bad. There's cavalry, people on horseback with spears. And there are slingers. There are projectile warriors. So, bow and arrow, spear, and slinging. What David is. And slinging is, with a rock, the end of a long rope, little pouch, and you go, and you release it. And slingers are unbelievably good. A good one can throw a rock like this, size of a baseball, at maybe 140 miles an hour, with devastating accuracy. This is up to 200. These guys are dead. So, and what ancient warfare is rock, paper, scissors. Cavalry can take out slingers take out infantry, and infantry take out cavalry. That's the way it works. So David's alliance, David's cavalry. So what is it? Slinger versus infantry. Who wins? Slinger. David is the favorite. Right. So the alliance sees David as Slinger. The first thing is in love. So here's a situation where two guys meet on the main side of Jerusalem. One guy's going up there, kills the other guy like he's supposed to. And then he holds up the railroad in the 2,000 years. And he's exactly on the way. And that's the whole that's a long I think it's all the time. I think they have categories that have no connection back. They're just kind of methodologies. Goliath is wearing armor, and he won, right? That's kind of the level of sophistication of our analysis. I think on lots of different cases. So the book is an attempt to say, that's a book critical at our definition and all kinds of different
and when you talk about that, because I think part of it was, this book was New York article about women.
Yeah, it's not in the book because this is a case where years ago I go to this conference and I have to that is Indian and he's software guy and all that. And I don't understand software, but he's talking about sports. He has a daughter who's 12 years old, and she plays club basketball in Colorado. Now that is like, if he's 5'8", so we can imagine the size of her. She's not a basketball player, she's very skinny, Indian girl. And her team is full of people like that. You can imagine what girls that level basketball team all looks like. It's a bunch of dirty soccer programs. You know what about basketball, but he wants to keep on to his So he'll give you a very high IQ soccer program who begins to study basketball with all the insight I don't know outside. So he goes to basketball games watching and he doesn't understand it at all. The game makes sense. He keeps on saying, why when one basketball team, one team scores, do they run all the way back and wait for the other team to come to them? Why don't they take them the whole length of the court? Doesn't make sense. Why don't you let that team unassisted the hard system which is going to win basketball? So he decides that this team of girls can't dribble. He decides, they can't even run around. So he decides to make them do a full court press. That's like this guy. So imagine he's a little, nerdy girl. He didn't have no basketball. Just saying this. And then they're game like, get in back, where are the scores? So other parents of other teams, would understand what Americans growing up with basketball don't understand what's not. You're supposed to not get it. Now it's like, I will share it. You can't carry it all apart. All over that. Right. I thought this is supposed to be easy. So I wrote this describes the bash. It says, look, if you will break rules and be a little bit jerk and work really hard, you can win a lot. You can win all, but you can win a whole lot more than you got. It's not that. If you're David, if you're underdog, the secret to winning is not that hard. It's just change strategy. The last thing you want to do, if you're playing a team that actually knows how to play basketball, the last thing you play that. You watch, you see that have no chance of winning. Play exactly the same kind of football as teams that are going to go out. Why would you do that? You're the worst team in New England. Why would you have a hunt? Get him with the ball.
It's just that we're in a job, really. Not really. You covered that topic.
Yeah.
One of your about board games by Pentagon. And the guy who plays role stuff, same thing in this board game, decimates the U.S. And so sort of that concept of sometimes thinking what we call a job is this strategic end because you're forced to think differently, how to approach the game differently. And I suspect that has applications and something we should think about in business, in science. And you talk about business, not always break the first market or be number one. Sometimes I know everything's smaller.
I've thought about this in terms of scientific research, which is there are some variables that are used in scientific research that are thought to predict the outcome. But we have questions of data on whether these variables do what they're supposed to do. So it would be really useful to conduct this experiment. So suppose you go to the neuroscience faculty, UCLA. And you split it into two, somewhat arbitrarily. And you said that to one half. You guys go ahead and continue your work the way you work. And you fund all your grants. And you say to the other half, we will fund 50% of your grants at 50% of your investment. But in return, we will remove a whole series of restrictions on who you get to create. You give them some, you take away resources and you add freedom. Or you might allow them to do things like, hiring. Arbitrary that each professor, whomever the game system, or whatever, and then just an experiment. Let the two sides compete over the course of a number of years. And see if there's any people difference in quality of the actually, it's not just the quality of research, it's interesting in that scenario. It's a difference in the kind of problem you choose to do. If you have a difference in the and that's almost more interesting. Because I wonder whether, I have a system in my book, I recently discussed that, I have a little book in my book about at the National Cancer Institute in the golden age of cancer research. I think it was in the 60s, where they made incredible progress against 4 or 5 different cancers in a very, very short period of time. Without really any coming drugs, just by finding better ways to do stuff that are already on the shelf. And I spent all this time talking to people from that era. And what was striking to me was how few resources they had relative to their time. They thought they had money. In fact, they had no money. But what they had was freedom. So I remember they go and see all of the whole cohort of people did. You hear how to in the robotics people. They're all alive. And I went to see one of them. And chunking is that the codes track on that because they do one of the first combination of their pictures. Before that, it's just like they basically take 4 steps, 4 drugs on the shelf and say, none of them work by themselves, and say, well, what if we just really get a cocktail? They endlessly experiment with the dose and the combination and the schedule and they make their theory. So I go to one of the guys, and he said, one month, 8 years. And then we're going over what happened back in the 60s. And he just moved to his office. And so he had all these old files that he had looked at. I'm talking about, he was the guy who wrote the protocol for the first combination chemotherapy trial. Maybe he wrote it. And he says, it's funny you asked about it, because I just found the protocol. Oh, can I see it? Yeah, here. And he reached down on his desk and picked it up. I think they wasn't picked it up. hyped up. Today, what? How many years of work and thousands of things? These guys were like, this is one of the most legendary and crucial clinical trials in the history of modern medicine. And I got up at night, on 2 pages. Now, we don't want to back with those days, obviously, but I'm saying that's the trade-off, right? Nobody knows there's a ton of freedom. Get to see something really interesting. And is it better than what little freedom lots of things I don't know. But I would love to know, I'd love to try to give people a chance to work on the old paradigm.
We are entering an interesting paradigm right now. For those of you who not those of you who understand, but where funding is decreasing or being redistributed. And so resources are shrinking, and we have to make do with smaller amounts of resources. But without that second equation, without the freedom.
When I think of every 5 years I talk about what to go through setup experiments, I just think it's absurd. It's like it's almost like a measuring system that is designed to crowd out the most creative and spontaneous things.
Question about the structure of the university going forward. So universities have been bastions of innovation and creativity. Well, but we're coming to a time where it's really not encouraged or promoted at all. NIH, you must do research that will succeed or you don't get money. We're constrained by financial, whatever, the university setting of being aspirated as we might. This doesn't bode well for our institution.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe it's time to explicitly bring up, talk about this, just say we'll accept, keep giving more freedom, we'll accept. Although I don't know whether part of me says that, and part of me says the other thing, of course, is that these obvious are minimal science, but not always acceptable, which is that the combined budget of every bit of scientific research done in this country compared to the other things in the budget is so incredibly minuscule. I mean, the NIH budget is absurdly small. I mean, given the total challenges like that. So it's sort of like to give up, to say they would take less money is just not natural.
You still drive a shuttle?
I do. I don't. That's a trick question because I'm actually a huge pilot. I drive a Gladwell car, which is exactly like your grandma's doing a golf, but it's a little tiny car. And the guy in New York, the only guy who notices the car is the guy in the market who looks at it, whoa, this is a very, it's a golf. Can't see it.
Well, and the question we're going to ask you, things like that, but I'm afraid that you describe the VW goal as an engineering feat compared to, for example, Ferrari. Because to build a car on that budget is far more difficult than whatever Ferrari. So if all of us in this room decided today that we want to build a $500,000 supercar, we could accomplish that task in under 2 years. No doubt about it. We start tomorrow? Absolutely. It's not that hard. If you had to charge $500,000 for your car, you could make a great car to be able to do. If I said to you, all of us we would like to build a $25,000 performance car, we could do it in games. The golf as an engineering feat is infinitely more fascinating than Ferrari. It's like buying a super and how do you do that? I mean, what else was so great about people buying really expensive automobiles?
and they're expecting to be arrested, they're like, well, yeah. That's the real, shady pieces of place. It's very nice. I think we're just making a decision for McDonald's was good. That's, so it's like,
so that a sign, a key, as we were talking about before, doing more when we're having less. And that creativity.
I also want to do that, I haven't done this, but I'm also fascinated with, for example, with movies. What is the overlap between a great movie and a relatively high budget? So if you look, for example, we take a look at the list of the 50 greatest movies of all time, it's done by the critics poll. What percentage of those movies in your favorite made were in the 90% of the country class, or even in the top 50% of the my guess is that most of them went on with a handful of exceptions. I don't think of it giving someone a lot of money. It makes for in that sort of very, very great environment. I think we're more often that as a big budget in more.
And so people with underdog, lesser budget, probably more hungry to succeed, and I think it's
yeah, of course you do. So once you're someone, and once you're through it, it's really, really fun. We started out, why is Jaws a better movie than Jurassic Park? And so both made by Steve Spielberg. One made for a fraction of the cost of the other, even confiscated doesn't tell us. As Mary saying, because in Jaws, the state of the technology that rendered these artificial animals was so primitive. You can't see the fish, right? You can only see it like really, really briefly. You can't linger on the shark because the shark is so obviously big. So what does that do? It forces you to actually tell a story around the shark. And that's what Jaws is. It's an incredible movie because it's a story around a shark. Now, fast forward to Jurassic Park, and all of a sudden you've got CGI, all of a sudden you can linger on a dinosaur. What does that let you do? Because it forces you to tell a story around a dinosaur. Right?
and you can see that happening in Hollywood on TV all the time. The story uses that special effects or
this is the whole, I have a whole section about sort of winner's first problem. This is in the category of things that, the mistakes that rich people made by their rich people. So I use this example of, I just super hilarious, I'm not going to give you the book. So I decided, I went around and started getting into building it. And by the way, there's a lot of money, it's not my money. And I asked them all about their children. What was the last thing your parents doing? So what you, and the way you do the interviews is you start out, so I know you did self-made videos. This is like totally ridiculous, artificial. Anyway, but a lot of them. So we start out with the story of how did you make? And they all, my dad was a plumber, I had 7 jobs to the age of 4, people are like that. That's what they're like. They kind of, they went into here and they struggled and they did this and the whole narrative of their success is about overcoming obstacles and difficulties. And then you say, oh yeah, so tell me about your kids. How do you reach your kids? And they, my kid goes to that school, and then about 10 minutes into listing all the great things they do for your kids, they realize they subscribe to my fiction. Right? And you realize as well, they realize as well, and they will start to talk about this, that by virtue of their own success, they have created an environment for their children that denies their children the possibility of replicating their success. And it's a big paradox. So then in round 2, I interview the kids. I go back to the beginnings. How it looks like growing up with daddy inside $1 billion. And I actually never, a whole bunch of these, I have never felt so sorry for someone at all. Really, I don't say that because really, truly, you don't want that. It's really hard to have every aspect of your life be kind of, money touches on everything that you do when you have that much money. And parenting becomes incredibly difficult. And your choices get constrained in all these ways that you can't imagine. And I was in with this one girl, and black sheep of the family. She was the only one to go and do something. All no one else in her family worked. Her grandfather did. Everyone, every single member of her extended family lived off her grandfather's money. And she was the rebel who wanted to work. And she was talking about all the struggles she had and feeling independent. When even as she was trying to get a job, the job ended up being her grandfather's nonprofit. And he was still paying her health insurance and her car and her. Just because he could and did, and how do you say no to that? And as a result, there was a woman who was 22 or 23 and had achieved nothing for herself. And no amount of money in the world makes up for the feeling of having accomplished that.
So when you have kids, learn lessons.
I have one on the way. Yeah, no, but yeah.
Well, remind you that we're getting the book later. Let's take a few minutes and we'll open it up to the audience. And then again, I have one last question to ask. Do you want to pick a people or should I? Go ahead.
My name is Ryan Wright, and my research is on neuroeconomics, and also I did a thesis on George Clemson, so this is a part of the question. It relates to participatory journalism. When you talk about the definition of advantage, Gordon Gecko said he would take two hungry guys off the streets versus Harvard graduates. Have you thought about maybe taking on Serena Williams the way that Bobby Riggs took on Billie Jean?
Short answer is no. Participatory journalism strikes me as sort of terrifying. You have to be prepared to make a spectacle of yourself. And I think I have made enough of a spectacle of myself in my career, but it's just something else.
Well, thank you for that great discussion. So, I'm on faculty in medical school, and I wanted to ask about link. My 4 years and its implications for those of us in medicine. So, in the book, you advance the thesis that we can sort of think about thinking that we can make these accurate snap judgments and give the story of the proofs of the hill very day. And then this is a celebrated and very conceptually appealing concept that we can walk into medicine, walk into a patient's room, and these long-bearded professors will smell the air, and they'll make this spectacular diagnosis. And this is celebrated, and our students are sort of given these vignettes, and it's sort of what our students are expected to do. But the detail that that's often missing is that professor is usually wrong. In fact, almost always.
Yeah.
But he or she confuses those situations for the majority of the time. So since you wrote the book, there's been a lot of criticism that maybe wasn't even-handed, and in fact, we're often wrong more than we're right. We have House MD, we have these people around that are brought to us as sort of great examples of how to do things right, and in fact, it's usually dead wrong. And there are big implications in medicine. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Blink is an odd book because what I thought I was saying is not what many people say I'm saying. I thought I was writing a book that was very critical of snap judgments and intuitive thinking, and was trying to say that they have usefulness and utility only in an incredibly narrow band of situations, where you have no other alternatives, where you have someone with deep experience, and where you have carefully cordoned off sources of bias. Absent that, I thought I wrote a book that made the case that you should run as far and as fast as possible from here. And the whole last half of the book, of course, is all about cases of snap judgments that have gone horribly awry, starting with Monster Binary research at Yale, and telling the story of the Diallo shooting, and then telling the story of in the end, the book ends on that description of how maestros were doing open auditions and were being fooled by the gender of the people who were playing for them, in thinking women couldn't play classical music. So I've been wholly fooled. Unfortunately, sometimes the book you write is not the book that people want to read. And I made a mistake in retrospect, is the book, I wanted to write the book like a detective story, and I wanted to start out by telling you about how great snapdragons were, and then I wanted to slowly disabuse you of that notion and peel one bit until you were left with the last major chapter, is these cops shooting a black guy 32 times because they did a spectacularly wrong judgment. I wonder whether most people are going to finish it. First anecdote, they're like, whoa, this is fantastic. And then they're like, you know. So there's a real, I won't do that again. I'm going to state what I mean on the first page. Say something to this edge.
I'm not on the faculty but since the past 10 years in your books, there's been a lot of other books kind of like in the same vein, like Freakonomics series, like Nudge, Rationality, whatever. Why do you think that's become such a popular medium, such a popular kind of area of people are interested in?
Because the tradition of which I'm a part, so you're right, there's a bunch of people like me who are mining this thing. And we're doing it because there is so much extraordinarily fascinating stuff going on in academia that is not making it out into the public. And every time I go and spend all those hours in Bell's library and my reading journals, I'm just amazed at the quantity and quality of thinking that goes on places like this. And then people don't, academics by virtue of their job description and their skill set and their disciplines shouldn't, by the way, don't and shouldn't spend all their time popularizing their work. Their job is to do deep thinking, and there's a role then for someone to come along and to take stuff and make it accessible. And I think what's happened in the last 20 years is that a bunch of people like myself have realized that there's just an infinite amount of fabulous stuff that would otherwise go, for people outside of academia, would go unnoticed. And that just seems, it's crazy. So as long as you guys keep doing cool things,
Let's take someone in the back and we'll get way back.
Could you speak briefly about how you got to be a staff writer at the New Yorker and a best-selling author?
Second part. I started in the New Yorker. I was working for the Washington Post as their New York correspondent, and I was bored. And also, in Washington, no one cares about New York, so they only care about Washington. So I got the job as New York correspondent because, this is true, no one else applied for it. So I came to New York and discovered they didn't interest in anything else. Right. And so I started my first rebellious response was to write increasingly baroque and esoteric stories. And no one seemed to care, including, by the way, a 4,000-word story about a dog named Taro on death row. Because at the time in New Jersey, it was a capital. If a dog bit a human being, it was a capital offense. The dog was sentenced. And it was actually a death row. But there had been so many, there were 7 different legal motions, state's execution, etc., granted to this dog named Taro. And it had been unfolding over years. And so I was being so ignored that I decided to devote an enormous chunk of my time to chronicling the status of this dog. And I hung out with members of the Canine Bar in New Jersey, and I went through all of the jurisprudence related to convicted doggy felons. And I produced what I thought was a masterwork. So then I decided, you know what, if they don't care, I should write for someone else. At the time, for the New Yorker, you could write those things at the front without your name on them, because we weren't actually allowed to write. So I started writing stuff for them unsigned. And then there was a month where I realized I had written more for New Yorker than I had for my own newspaper, and that's when I realized I had to go. So I quit. And, but this really answers your question. I started. I had people. They were former Washington Post people who moved to. I I just knew people. And I don't know why my books have sold well. It's the source of buying history. I refer to them to my agent as my cockroaches because nothing seems to go there. I feel like it would be a nuclear, blast, and there would still be copies of Tipping Point. So I have nothing, no great insight as to why.
That's the topic of one of your next books, right?
Yes.
There's probably a fair number of neuroscientists in the audience today, and part of what you talked about today in any of your books, whether it's giving yourself enough time to write an essay or being predisposed to make bad decisions, at their core about how the brain works. I think that's why a lot of us are attracted to her. I was wondering how much you delved into the neuroscience underlying what we talked about also in terms of the intuitive system versus reflective system. This type of thing where people ask about what do cows drink, what do you talk about in blink, everybody thinks no. But it's the reflective system that comes in later.
Yeah.
And tells us, oh, let's double check that answer.
Yeah.
So at a very mechanistic level, we're talking about properties of how your brain works. And do you think much about that? Do you write more about that?
Well, the place to have done that would have been Blink. And I probably should have, and didn't. Which is one of the reasons why, as I said earlier, I think the book is actually technically a failure. It doesn't do what it was intended to do. There have recently been a number of really, really, really good books that deal with neuroscience. And also, neuroscience is unusual as a field in that it has a number of neuroscientists who are extraordinarily gifted populations, beginning with Oliver Sacks, and going through, there's probably 5 I can name who have written books that are so much better than I could ever write that it is pointless. I'm not going to try and compete with, a Damasio or any of these people who are, extraordinary writers, but also giants in the field. So I've sort of shied away from dipping my toe in those waters. I mean, once you've read a book of Oliver Sacks' essays, you just can't. It's like, I can't do that. I mean, it would be foolish. In my current book, I've actually moved even further away. There's very little science in it at all. And in very little psychology even. And what I've really gone into is more of sociology and then more just kind of simple narrative as a way to kind of. And I often, in my perfect world, my books are gateways to more serious reading. That's what they should provoke. If they work, they provoke your imagination in such a way that you want to go and read some Damasio or want to take a course in X. That's how I would like them to be used. I'm the marijuana of.
We're getting close to the end of the hour, so I'm going to ask a couple of very quick final questions, and then you can stay for a few minutes and close and whatnot, and people can ask other questions. Quick question and then an even quicker question. First is, you're an excellent writer and an excellent storyteller, among other things. Are you ever tempted to write fiction?
No, fiction could not be more different from nonfiction. I mean, it's like saying to Kobe Bryant, you got a great jump shot, have you ever thought of becoming a professional golfer? And the answer he would say is, no, they're totally different. It's tempting to think that they're superficially similar, but the cognitive process is worlds apart. And I'll give you a quick example of this. The whole joy and motor of being a nonfiction writer is discovering something that's real. The fact that it's real is what is so. So there's a story I was reading about Martin Luther King, where King is giving a speech in '63 in Birmingham, and a man, tall, strong, white man, strides up on stage. Everyone assumes that the man is taking part in his service. And in fact, he's this young guy, and he is a racist. And he comes up to King in front of 700 people and starts pummeling with his fists. And they fall on the ground, and King's aides, descend on the man to pull him off and beat him up. And King covers the man with his body so that no one can hurt him. starts whispering as you're asking his name, and says to him, "Violence is futile," pushes away all of his aides, lifts the man up, holds his arm up, introduces him to the crowd, and then the man just starts weeping, collapses in handcuffs. Okay? That's a true story. Actually. The fact that it's true is why it's meaningful to me, why it's moving to me, why it's moving to you, why it's kind of... I had no interest in making up stories like that. Right? And if I made that story up, you wouldn't believe it. You'd think, oh, it's corny and cheesy. Right? And so what's hard about fiction is you've got to make up stuff. By definition, real stuff is better than fiction stuff. Because you can't, you know, the truth is stranger than fiction thing is absolutely true. So writing fiction is really hard because you've got to take something off the story. And I just have no, I don't want to take something off the story. I want the story, I want that story where, like, he actually did it. And the guy's a Nazi. He was a Nazi. He lived in the Nazi dormitory in Arlington, Virginia, and he collapses in tears in front of him. You know, it's like, Jesus.
Final question. So I'm in charge with the committee of inviting IMED speakers every year for the seminar series. You've seen the list of this year. Who would you invite? So who would you come to? Now, getting at who are the people that you admire? Who are role models? Who would you come back to LA to hear?
Oh, that's such a good question. So many people. Although I sort of feel like I would rather be, I'm going to direct the question and say, I'd rather be surprised. I mean, what I'd much rather do is come and hear something who I'd never heard of, so that I would be exposed to something that was completely outside of my, right? The problem with me recommending someone is that I recommend them because I know something about them, but by definition then, what they have to say is going to be less interesting. But a lot of what it means to stay curious and creative is to deliberately put yourself in strangers' way, right? Not in harm's way, but in the way of things that are completely outside of your experience. So I just like to show up on a random Wednesday.
You're always invited. You're invited back. I'd like to thank you.